Hi everyone. You are on the Software Developer blog channel. I think every programmer, looking at someone else's code, can immediately find how to improve it. Sometimes this is over-engineering. And sometimes these are real problems when the code leaves much to be desired. So today we will talk about how to determine that the code is not very good. There is such a thing as code smell. But before you start watching, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video. This really helps in the development of the channel. If we talk about what code smells are, these are key signs of the need for refactoring. The term was popularized by Kent Beck in the late 1990s. The use of the term increased after it was described in the 1999 book Refactoring, Improving the Design of Existing Code, written by Martin Fowler. This book outlines everything you need to know about code smells. Also on the Refactoring Guru resource, there are also good examples about code smells. In fact, there are always points that can be improved, refactored, so I have highlighted for myself the most important points, code smells that I pay attention to during code reviews. And the first and most important rule is to avoid duplicating code, or you can say, use the DIY don't repeat yourself principle when writing program code. If you look at someone else's code or your code and see that some code is duplicated, this absolutely shows that this code stinks. Why is it so important to avoid duplication? Everything is simple here. Firstly, there is no need and common sense to bloat the code into identical pieces that do the same thing. Secondly, if the code is duplicated several times in different parts of the system, then if an error is found in one part of the duplicate code, you need to remember all the parts where it was duplicated, and correct the error there too. Thirdly, it is a deterioration in the performance of the code, system, application where you use this code. The second thing you often pay attention to and focus on in real projects is the inflators. Bloaters represent code, methods, and classes that have bloated to such a large size that they can no longer be used effectively. Yes, this often happens. There was a regular method that did some kind of action, but the business asked to add something like this with 10 conditions. And it turns out that instead of a compact method, there is a bunch of code with 150 lines or more. The same applies to classes, the number of parameters that we pass into method. Each project may have its own rules regarding this, but for myself I created such a rule that a class, component cannot be more than 500 lines of code, a method, function no more than 30 lines. And the number of parameters of a method or function is no more than 3. Yes, you may think and say that this is all nonsense, and it is not necessary to observe this, and you can create classes, more methods. It's your choice, but from experience I'll say that it will come back to haunt you later than a method, class, component that is less easy to read and understand when you have huge classes, components, functions, and in addition there will be no good documentation. You will be tired of debugging, looking for a problem and dealing with this body of code that does a bunch of actions to solve a problem, make a correction or fix a bug. The third factor that is also often encountered is comments or commented code. I don't mind comments, but they should be left in the code only in exceptional cases, when it's really needed. Most often, inappropriate information is found in comments, for example, authors, date of last modification, etc. Why leave this in the code if there is a version control system, or it often happens. Outdated comment, the content of which has lost its relevance. Redundant comment, describing something that is already obvious. For example, if you call the getContactById method, there is no need to write comments of this kind. This method receives contacts by identifier. Why does the method already say that it makes a comment is not needed here? I also include here. Commented code is a very bad habit. Firstly, why keep code that doesn't work? And secondly, it's unlikely that anyone will delete it in the future, and it will always be lying around. No need. Be afraid to delete something that has lost its relevance. There is a version control system, which is needed to store the history of changes. If this piece is needed, you can always roll back the commit to delete. The fourth factor that often occurs is when a method or function performs several operations. There is a simple rule, function, the method must perform one operation, and that's it. A new operation is needed, a new method is created that does it. The more compact the method, the less time it will take to figure out what it does. This is a simple rule, but I even sometimes neglect it myself. It seems like what's wrong with this? the logic is already so simple, why create another method for this? But today it's simple, but tomorrow it's no longer there. It's still worth thinking about expanding and changing business needs immediately when writing code. Well, the fifth one is change weights. This is probably the most unobvious code smell. Change weights means that if you need to change something in one place in the program, you have to make many changes in other places. Yes, this often happens. To add, for example, one field, you need change the method, transmissions, mapping logic, display, validation logic, and so on. This happens because your project was not designed correctly from the beginning, you didn't think it through. Dependencies and opportunities for extension, and it turns out that when performing any modifications, you have to make many small changes to a large number of classes and components. This can be said to be the basis that should be followed, but in fact we have not yet talked about hiring conventions, dead code, magic numbers in code, hard code of values in the code, or even identifiers, and much more that should be observed when writing code. Yes, I advise you to study everything in detail. Code smells. This will help you become a real professional and understand best practices when creating your projects. And that's all for me. Don't forget to write comments, like the video and subscribe to the channel. Here you will learn a lot of new and interesting things from the world of development.